Well, welcome everybody. Colleen, I assume you can still hear me.
hmm
That was unsolicited. So anyway, welcome everybody. Capt Ron here to for this week's edition of Fearless Flight Live. I'm on a bit of a vacation, a holiday, if you will, and so I'm operating on my backup resources. And you'll probably see some faux pas on my part, pilot error, and not to worry. We got a great show tonight. Got a particularly fascinating and interesting guest, and I'm going to get to her in just a minute. Right now, I'm just going to start right into the show, and I will share my screen. And if I can find the do. Okay, so you're probably seeing some stuff that I don't want to see there. Okay. Okay, so here it is. Folks, welcome once again to Fearless Flight Live, our weekly live show, tailored to those of you who have a fear of flying, those of you who might know somebody who has a fear of flying, and then those of you who might just want to stay in touch with the airline industry, sort of out of the corner of your eye. Anyway, we meet every week. And we're glad to help out wherever we can. We're here to support all of you out there in your efforts to overcome your fear of flying. The first thing I always mention is we have a Facebook group, a private group called Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather. We encourage you to join if you are not a member. We have special webinars for the group and some other benefits. And if you want to, just go to that link there at the bottom, flf.link/BOF for Birds of a Feather, and join and let everybody know you're there, who you are, where you are, and what you need support with. It's a great place to get help. This week I have a special guest, as I alluded to. And what's the story behind the plane drops 26,000 feet? I'll tell you later when we get to that. I'm going to invite my guest to comment on that as well. I will talk briefly about the July live monthly group coaching session coming up on it should be July 17th, and then your questions. So, without further ado, let's click onto that. Okay, Boeing, you know what? I'm going to skip past this. And
It's still showing your emails, Ron.
is it really? Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's such a disappointment. Okay. But thank you for telling me that. So I'm going to try a share again. Okay. At least maybe I can do that. The problem is in the slides there. And we may just go straight to you, Colleen, because I've about had it with my technology here. And is it showing a slide at this point? No.
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I am going to skip past this though, and we'll save that. So right now, I'm going to um, go out of this, stop my share, and go back to just you. Well, come on out of hiding from not hiding because I asked you to do that, but come on out, Colleen, and I'll introduce you. Colleen is someone, oh my gosh, how many years ago was it that when we first talked?
I think it's been 7 years.
7 years. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad to have you. You made the mistake of contacting me to get reconnected with the flight harmonizer, and I said, "Oh, funny you should show up." And
Right.
I'd love to have you on here. So you're somebody that had an fear flying. I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'm going to have you describe that a little bit in just a minute here.
Mhm.
And you've shared that your fear flying has become much easier for you over the years. Could you walk us through how you got to where you are today, where you started and where you ended up today? And first,
Sure.
people who you are and what where a little bit about yourself, if you would.
My name is Colleen Vosicki. I live in Las Vegas and I'm a teacher here in Las Vegas. And I have two kids, one a 20-year-old in college and a 14-year-old son. I am originally from Michigan and I probably stopped flying in my 20s, even though I I still did it once in a while, but there were definite incidents that I remember not taking part in. Primarily, a group of my colleagues used to take kids around the world over the summer for weeks, and I never took part in that because I was too afraid to do that. Um, I still would fly once in a while, but it never really went well. I remember sitting on the floor in Las Vegas terminal one year crying because there was no way I could get back on that plane to go home. I stayed up until maybe midnight one night playing poker and drinking and thinking this will get me tired and I'll be ready to sleep all the way home. Well, no, that didn't work either. Um, so I think by the time I got into my 30s, I didn't fly for probably about 10 years.
Mhm.
And the catalyst that got me to Captain Ron was I was packed and ready to go to the airport to fly home for my niece's wedding. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't even get to the airport because I knew I wasn't going to get on the plane.
Yeah.
And it was at that point that I was like, this is ridiculous. I've got to do something. And I happened upon Captain Ron and went to Phoenix. And the rest is history, as they say.
Well, I'm glad you did. Glad to have met you. And was there a particular the turning point seems to be when you just got sick and tired of being sick and tired of it,
Yeah.
and you go ahead.
I think the things, everything in the class seemed to hit me at the right spot.
Okay.
And I still have my notes
Okay. Great.
that I've taken over the years, and I still go over them when I fly. But there was enough of the logic of flying that I learned about, how planes fly and why they're safer in the air than they are on the ground. There was enough recognition of what anxiety is and what it does to you that spoke to me. And it just all seemed to click for me on all of the right levels. So I think understanding flight, understanding anxiety, and then having the tools to use on so many different levels were the things that got me back on an airplane. And then once I was able to do it, I just I keep reminding myself of all the things that I missed out on in my life, along with all of the opportunities I have now that I'm so grateful I'm taking advantage of. It's just changed my family's life, really.
Yeah, and congratulations again. And what were some of the what were some of the places you've or what were some of the most important flights or the most necessary flights that you've made? Because
The
you have
most,
interesting history. Yeah.
yeah, I think the most important, and one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to overcome this is that I do have a special needs child,
Yeah.
and there was no way he would ever be able to fly alone. And there was no way I could fly with him when I couldn't keep myself together because he would feed off of whatever I was going through. And just like with small kids, you don't know how they're going to react in this very scary new environment. It's loud. You're in this small little place. And so I needed to be in control of myself in order to go with him. And so now that I can fly and I've flown with him and he's met pilots and everybody's really, kind with him, and I always am very upfront with the flight attendants, and I say I'm traveling with a special needs child. This is what might happen. They're always very respectful and helpful. I was able to fly him to camp last summer in Chicago. I had to fly him out there, fly home and go to work, and then fly back to Chicago and pick him up and fly him home. So
Wow.
two of those flights I did within 24 hours.
Wow.
I mean, there's no way I could have done that
Sure.
before.
Sure.
We've traveled to Houston to take a cruise. I've flown to San Francisco to go to a wedding reception last fall. I've gone to Michigan several times. My daughter went to school in Colorado, and we would fly up regularly to visit her. I just flew to Reno 3 weeks ago, which is how I got back in touch with Captain Ron.
Yeah.
Um, because I was so comfortable, I didn't realize I didn't have my harmonizer on my phone anymore. So it wasn't until I got to the airport that I thought, oh, I should probably do my routine. And lo and behold, I didn't have it, but I was still fine.
So what is your routine? Or is it
So
or
my routine, and one of the things I do want to share is that just because I have a routine, I'm not under the illusion that if my routine doesn't work for some reason, I won't be able to be safe.
yeah.
That's not, It's
Yeah.
not wishful thinking. It's not magical thinking. This is just what I do because it works. But I usually start listening to the harmonizer 1 or 2 days before I fly, just to get my mind back in that relaxation mode. And then I listen to it when I'm waiting to board.
And could you
Um,
describe, just for people who don't have the harmonizer, what
yeah,
is what is it?
it's a it's a multimodal kind of relaxation meditation audio, and it goes through how to relax your body and gives you different techniques. It talks about flying and what's happening during takeoff and landing. And it gives you some really great quotes and great ideas about flying that are more inspiring than they are terrifying. um, so
And
I use that. And then I always tell the flight attendant, if I'm with my son, that I am traveling with a special passenger. But in the beginning, I also would tell them that I was a fearful flyer. And
cool.
if they could check on me, I would really appreciate it. When we're waiting to taxi, I do the tightening of my muscles and the relaxation of my muscles a couple of times. I've taught my son that one too.
Oh,
And
really?
then oh yeah,
Yeah.
he knows everything about your program because I've shared everything with him.
Yeah.
And then I always remind myself that if we get to, I think it's V1, we're set for takeoff
Right.
because everything has been checked 100 million times. And then when we're in the air, if there's turbulence, I just remind myself it's bumps on the road. It's like you're driving down the 15 in Las Vegas, and the plane is just looking for a smoother path, and you'll find it.
Yeah.
And that those are really the things I do all the time.
Yeah. When you talk about the harmonizer, you said it's a multimodal, which is pretty accurate. The thing that I put in the back of my mind when I first started entertaining the thought of meditation was long before I ever started helping people who were afraid to fly. But I always had this thing, sitting in the lotus position with your legs crossed or whatever. In my
Right?
less crossing because I can't do that very well. But with the harmonizer, I've described it sometimes as a dynamic meditation. So
Hmm.
when I got the idea, it was like, people, I heard I got the idea from another self-help tape that I had years ago. It was a cassette tape, so that tells you how many years ago it was. And it had this same kind of multimodal thing there. And what I thought, or I was jogging at the time, and I remember that, oh, that's interesting, and there's a lot of talk out there about ADHD. People have trouble
Hmm.
fixating their attention. But I found with fearful flyers, they get stuck with their attention.
Hmm.
They can't move it. And so that's what it struck me, just okay, if you can't beat them, join them. So
Right.
my first intent was to turn the volume up and just make a lot of noise and with tracks in there. So, and that apparently is what kind of works for you as well.
Yeah, it definitely works for me. And I think, and like you said, it kind of drowns out your other thoughts that you're afraid of. But I've also realized a lot of fear of flying is not fear of flying, it's fear of what that makes our bodies feel like
Yeah.
and what it makes our minds do. And so, like you said, we get fixated on, oh, the wings aren't supposed to move. Well, when you realize that they are supposed to move and that's their job, to keep the plane aloft, then you can relax that fear.
Yeah.
I also loved your acronym that fear was false evidence appearing real. And I've really kind of stuck to that because my fears were more, like I said, they weren't real. They were more hypothetical fear than
Yeah.
actual fear.
And I always try to make the distinction that I'm not saying that the feelings that you have are not real because they're very real,
Right.
and you would attest
Yep.
to that, but it's the stories that we tell ourselves that are triggered by the feelings. And I was talking to a client today. I've been working with him for about 8 years or so, and he flies and he does well, but he goes like this time is about a year since he last flew, and it's just
Hmm.
just perplexing why the closer he gets to the flight, why the anxiety happens. And I've been telling more and more people lately that, if you cut your arm, no amount of meditation is going to make it quit hurting until you get
Hmm.
some kind of first aid. So maybe that is a part of having an anxiety disorder is that
Hmm.
it's like a cut because it certainly activates the same parts of the brain, and so the feelings are real. But as you pointed out, it's the story we tell ourselves that it's appearing real, but it's not really real. And that's why I was always touched by your blend of doing the harmonizer, which is more of a distraction technique, and then also supplementing it with learning about flying. And you don't you should
Hmm.
have to be a pilot with that level of knowledge, but it does help to know something about what's flying, certainly to dispel myths that you might have about flying, and
Absolutely.
yeah, and then they go beyond that. Your son, what you say he knows as much about that. So I don't want to invade his privacy or anything, but
No.
what's it like for him? What changes have you seen?
Well, it's funny because now that he's getting a little bit older, I can see where some of his nervousness has come in when we fly. And he's very good. Like we share the AirPods when we're waiting to board and we listen to the harmonizer together.
So
But
he's harmonizing too, huh?
yeah, he harmonizes too. But and he knows, like I said, we do the muscle contractions. He knows also that I need to sit on the aisle seat because that's where I feel more comfortable if I need to get up and walk around or that kind of thing. But he knows that it's okay to be nervous, and that's, I think, a big deal. It's like you don't pretend like you're not nervous, but you have these tools to
Yeah,
help you get through it. And we always are so happy to be where we're going.
yeah,
That's the biggest thing. He loves to travel. Um, he would go all over the world if he could. And I love that I have a co-conspirator if we're going to go traveling. So
yeah.
even my daughter, she's really benefited from it. She was a fearful flyer for a while, but she's learned some of the techniques too, and she's happy to go.
Well, my heart goes out to you because for a lot of young kids who end up being anxious, it really is a challenge for them and what to do.
Mhm.
And but to accomplish that with your son, it sounds like a really, really amazing thing that you've done. You must be very
It's I am, and it's really opened up, our lives that
yeah,
we can go anywhere and go on vacation and enjoy ourselves. And I can see my kids thrive in ways that they can't when they're just home all the time.
yeah. And it's interesting. I had a client last night. I was doing a coaching session, and she's headed for Japan, which is a long flight, which
Yeah,
adds a lot of anxiety to a lot of people who are anxious anyway. And she has three children, 10, 17 or so, and 22. And she was telling me one of her biggest fears is that they will realize she's afraid to fly. So I talked to her. So would you have any advice for her? My advice was, one of the things, sure, it might be uncomfortable for them to know that at some level, but depending on their age, you try to teach them with age-related conversation that, hey, what I'm modeling for you, or what I've learned is being afraid and hiding it does not help. So I try to do things.
right.
You try to come up. So it'd be interesting if you have anything to add for anybody out there who's afraid that their kids will realize that they're afraid to fly.
I would just be careful with what I say about my anxiety. Like I wouldn't say, "Oh, I don't like being in enclosed spaces," because
Yeah,
then you plant the seed.
right.
But if you say something like, "Well, traveling is just a lot of stress for grown-ups and it makes me anxious if I made sure I did everything and are we going to get there on time?" The anxiety is the anxiety is the anxiety. It doesn't matter what the root is. So if you kind of, maybe tell a little white lie to a younger one who won't grasp onto that thing,
Yeah.
that trigger. And then you can say, but I'm going to deal with my anxiety and I'm going to, deal with it in this way. I think that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, I would agree. And the appropriate conversation is really important. And like you said, you just say, I'm a little nervous about flying, or it's
Right.
not something that I do first choice. And the other thing that I've encouraged people to do is make sure, particularly if they're younger, make sure to tell them that they don't have to worry about mom or dad because
Right.
I'm taking care of it. And otherwise, having grown up with a mom had some mental health issues, I felt responsible for her a lot. And
Right.
to me, that's the worst consequence of this is your kids, even if you're trying to disguise it, if they feel like somehow they should be able to help you through that. And yeah,
Right. Yeah.
so
And I never wanted my kids to be in that position. And it came down to either learning how to live with it and get past it or not having this life. And we'd rather have this life.
yeah. And so again, kudos to you. What's next on you? You mentioned you want to fly more and stuff. So what's
I
up?
do. Well, we're hoping to go to Turks and Caicos in October
Oh,
for a vacation. We've never been, so that would be great. And then my bucket list is still Ireland. It's just I probably won't come back. But
I've heard
I'm
it.
so
I've
not
heard.
afraid of it. It's just such an exciting idea. And the flight doesn't even occur to me. It's like, get that out of the way and get there, but yeah, it's just fun. It's so nice to be able to get places quickly and, safely. And it's great.
Well, that's on my bucket list too, because I've heard nothing but fascinating stories from Ireland that
Right.
beautiful and all that over there. So, well, in kind of bringing us to a close, what advice, I guarantee there's at least one person out there watching saying she really wasn't that afraid to fly because, what would you say to that person?
I have cried in more airports than, I mean, I literally was almost agoraphobic about it. I was afraid to leave the house the last time. I was that scared. And I have given up a lot of things in my younger years that I'll never get back. I know people say, if I can do it, you can do it. And that's the honest truth. Anyone who knows me can attest to my fear
Yeah.
and also to the traveling and great lengths that I've gone to in the last 7 or 8 years. And I honestly could not have done it without you.
Well, thanks. And I love to accept my part of this, but as I say to most people who thank me about that, don't blame me for your success because you're first of all had to step up. And how hard was it to reach out or seek some help?
I think it was really like a lot of things in life. When you're ready, the door opens. You were in Phoenix, I was in Las Vegas. I mean,
Yeah.
I literally came for the weekend and everything aligned as soon as I started to look for something. I think you were one of the first things I found. So as soon as I looked for the door, it was right there for me. So I would encourage anyone who's happened upon your work, if you're thinking about it, this is the right place to try.
Cool. Did we ever do a 15-minute coaching session or
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
recommend that to anybody who's watching,
Yep.
they'll have link dot 50 minute or slash 15-minute coaching session. And I'm gonna shift gears here. Any last words
Sure.
to people out there that
No, there's just you're going to be so glad you did. You're going to be so glad that you did. That's the only thing I can really say. It's not difficult and you're worth it. You're worth doing the work for yourself.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask you to stay on. I'm going to collaborate
Okay.
with you a little bit. We're going to, this is, there's always, I get people, particularly the way this year has gone in aviation. First, there was a mid-air collision in Washington, D.C. Then there was a couple other general aviation accidents. And then there was a Toronto crash. And then, of course, we had the Air India crash last week, which
Mhm.
much of the show on. But there, I just wanted to talk one thing that always it just galls me. I'm not anti-media, not at all. They print whatever today. Unlike when I grew up, where it was not a profit center for most of the major networks. Now it's a profit center, so now they got to attract attention. And I ran through the slide there. I don't know if it went out over the air or not, but there was this incident. I just happened to look yesterday, and everybody's carrying it says Boeing aircraft uh, falls out of the sky 26,000 feet. So when you see things like that now, how do you process that? I'm going to give a few of the details here to dispel that, but
Well, I would probably look at what happened and read the
yeah,
rest of it, but I don't I try not to focus on those things. I really, I hear about them and I know they happen and they're horrible. And I also know that there are millions of other people who flew that day and nothing happened to them.
yeah.
And you really just have to put it in perspective.
And you
If
are
you're going to look for something to
yeah,
scare you, you'll find it. But
absolutely.
if you're going to look for something to make you feel confident, you'll find that too. It's just
Yeah.
what you have to look for.
Yeah. We're a species that looks for patterns in the environment. We will
Hmm.
always find them, and the essence of that is if I'm afraid to fly, I will always find something that supports my belief. And the technical name for that is confirmation bias. And so a
Right.
little bit about this, I made some notes on that. So yesterday it was a Japanese 737, and they had a rapid decompression at 36,000 feet. I'm going to ask you. I don't mean to embarrass you or anything, but do
Nope.
you know what a rapid decompression is?
I can guess at what it is. It would be the decompression in the cabin. And so you had to go down to level out that air, whatever
Exactly.
it is.
We pressurize modern airplanes so that everyone doesn't have to get on with a scuba tank on filled
Right.
oxygen. That would be very cumbersome, not to mention expensive, and you'd only be able to haul half of the people because the tanks weigh as much as a child do. But so that's exactly right. For whatever reason, they lost cabin pressurization at 36,000 feet. So it could be more frightening if it was due to a window failing or something like that,
Mhm.
where there was a large loss, a sudden loss of that, or it can be a rather gradual process. I assume this was more of a sudden type of thing by the fact because the crew then did what they're supposed to do, and what we trained to do is they put the airplane in a controlled descent, not a dive, not a
Mhm.
fallout, not it doesn't plummet or plunge. They just put it in a very intense or intentional controlled dive to get below 14,000 feet, below which you can breathe a lot better than you can above that. And then ultimately, we usually descend to 10,000 feet, where then everybody can take off their masks because the ambient air now the cabin pressure is at 10,000 feet. And believe it or not, that's only about 1,500 feet higher than what it was just before the decompression because we
Mhm.
don't pressurize the airplane to sea level, which is a much greater differential in pressure. But we do blow the airplane. The fuselage actually inflates slightly every time you take
Mhm.
off, and then it deflates by the time you land. And so what happened was is the crew basically responded exactly as they were trained. Nobody got hurt that I know of. But the headline, when it says airplane plummets or drops 26,000 feet in 10 minutes, that's what it's supposed to do.
Mhm.
So it's disheartening to me because I know people who have a serious anxiety problem or even a slight anxiety over flying. They're going to look at that and then they say, "Oh, see, I told you you shouldn't ride an airplane and all that." So anyway,
Right.
and then what they did, they just diverted to an alternate airport. Now, I'm not going to say that it might have been exciting or not exciting in the back of that. Just like if we were to ever, prior to V1, have to stop the airplane, it could be very exciting because we're going to use maximum braking. You're going to see
Mhm.
smoke coming off the tires, and you're going to be pushed forward in your seat. But we're going to do anything to keep the airplane safe, and that's how we train all the time. In that, we do at least one practice depressurization in every sim session, and we do to make sure that we know
Mhm.
what we're doing there. So anyway, well, thanks for being the guinea pig there, but
Absolutely.
but your response is one that I totally endorse, and that is learn the facts about flying, and that's what you touched on. Learning more
Mhm.
aviation, flying, about the airplane. Learn more. I add psychology of the brain. What can you count on? You can count on your brain trying to fool you, trying to trick you into thinking that something is wrong and more serious when it really isn't. And so, lowering that, and I've been putting more emphasis on it lately, telling people when they tell me their symptoms and stuff, I say, you can't change that. You're going to be startled if something sudden happens. It doesn't
Mhm.
how inconsequential it might be. You just need to do that. So, or just need to be aware of that. So
And don't feel shame for how you feel. It's
that's
not a shameful condition.
and that's a great place to kind of wind this up because
Yeah.
what I've found over the 38 years I've been doing this is that as many things bother people mechanically about the airplane or feeling trapped in there, I think an even bigger pressure and what keeps people from seeking help is the feelings of shame and embarrassment. Did
Mhm.
you experience that yourself?
Absolutely. I never even could admit that I was afraid. There was always some other reason. And I felt so embarrassed and I felt shame like there was something wrong with me, that I was like this and so many other people were fine. But it's just there's no shame in it at all. And the sooner you accept it and move on, the happier you'll be.
Yeah, and that's been almost universally what I've gotten from people. So anyway, well, thanks so much,
Oh, you're
Colin,
so welcome. Thanks for having me.
and please don't be a stranger. Stay connected to us for as much as you need. We're here to support you whenever, just like we are with the rest of you out there. And thanks again for coming, and
Of course.
congratulations for all the distance you've traveled,
Thank
literally
you.
and figuratively. And
Hmm.
congratulations on being such a wonderful mom. So,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And thanks to everybody out there. I'm going to wind the show up tonight. And this has been another episode of Fearless Flight Live. We look forward to you coming and joining us every week. Thanks to people like Colleen who go out there and are leading the way. We have a fairly good record of people that overcoming their fears. So it's a great record for the ones that report back. So anyway, have a great evening. We'll see you again next week for Fearless Flight Live. Bye bye, everybody.